This is the story of Leo, an ordinary father whose perfect world was shattered on one fateful afternoon. But this isn't just a story about loss. It's about the impossible choice that comes after. The choice between what is right and what feels like justice. It's about the line between a grieving father and a vengeful monster. Stay with me until the very end, because when this story's over, you will have to answer a question that might change how you see the difference between justice and revenge forever. Before the night fell, before everything changed, there was a perfect world. It existed for just a few hours in a small neighborhood park in the city of Oak Haven. It was late summer, that time of year when the days are still long, but there's a little hint of a chill promising that autumn is on its way. The air was thick with the sweet smell of grilled corn and freshly cut grass. You could hear the distant, steady hum of city traffic, but it was easily drowned out by the much closer sound of children's laughter. The setting sun painted everything in that beautiful, golden hour light. The kind of light that filmmakers love because it makes everything look soft, warm, and just a little bit magical. Leo stood beside his wife, Clara. They weren't talking. They were just watching. Their son, Sam, was 7 years old. He was a whirlwind of energy and scraped knees, with a smile that was all Clara's and eyes that held the same steady determination as Leo's. He was the sun they both orbited around. He was running across the grass, his arms outstretched, holding a little red toy airplane. He'd make these swooping, diving motions, creating his own sound effects with a little whoosh and vroom under his breath. Then after one particularly ambitious dive, the plane landed a little too hard. Sam ran over, picked it up, and his face fell. One of the wings was bent. He walked over to his dad, his bottom lip trembling just a little, holding out the wounded toy. And this is the first moment I want you to hold on to, the first piece of that perfect world. Leo didn't just take the plane. He knelt down on the grass so he was looking right into his son's eyes. He took the little toy so gently in his big hands. With his thumb, he carefully straightened the plastic wing, moving slowly as if he were performing surgery. He checked it once, then twice. Then he handed it back to Sam. He leaned in close and whispered, so only Sam could hear. "There you go. Fly high, my little pilot." Sam's worried face instantly broke into that brilliant smile. He let out a little giggle, a pure, happy sound that seemed to sparkle in the evening air. And then he was off again, running with his plane held high above his head. It wasn't just a dad fixing a toy. It was a promise, a blessing. It was a small, quiet moment that said, "I am here. I will always keep you safe. I will always fix what is broken." As Leo stood up, brushing the grass from his knees, he felt a pair of arms wrap around his waist from behind. It was Clara. She rested her chin on his shoulder, and together, they watched their son chase the last rays of the sun. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. This was the second moment, the second piece of that world, the feeling that washed over them both. It was a silent understanding that said, this, right here, this is everything. They were a family, strong, happy. In that moment, standing in the golden light, surrounded by the sounds of their community, they felt invincible. You see, it wasn't just a nice afternoon at a block party. It was a feeling, the feeling of absolute safety, the powerful, dangerous belief that as long as you have your family huddled together in your small, warm circle of love, then nothing in the world can truly, deeply hurt you. Every single moment of peace, every second of simple joy is a treasure to be held on to tightly. But sometimes, the brightest light casts the darkest shadow, and standing there, bathed in the glow of the setting sun, no one could see the storm that was gathering just beyond the horizon. Every tragedy, they say, begins with a small disruption, a single wrong note in a perfect symphony. As the sun finally dipped below the rooftops, casting long, deep blue shadows across the park, that wrong note arrived. It came in the form of a police cruiser, rolling slowly to a stop at the edge of the grass. The blue and red lights weren't flashing, but their presence alone was enough to curdle the air. 2 officers stepped out. The older one, Officer Miller, had a weary look on his face, the kind of man who has seen too many long shifts. The younger one, Officer Russo, moved with an impatient energy, a tightly coiled spring. Miller approached Leo, his voice flat. "We got a noise complaint." Leo, still feeling the warmth of Clara's hug, kept his tone friendly and reasonable. "Officer, I understand. This is a community event, fully permitted. We're wrapping up in about 20 minutes. The music is already low." He was trying to de-escalate. He was being a good citizen. But Russo stepped forward, his eyes scanning the thinning crowd with disdain. "Permit or not, the call was made. Keep it down." And then it happened. The catalyst. The tiny, meaningless event that would unravel everything. Sam, still lost in his world of flight, was running with his little red airplane, making one last pass across the lawn. He wasn't being reckless. He was just being a 7-year-old boy. His path took him close to Officer Russo. He didn't even touch him, just brushed past the air beside him. But Russo, coiled tight with irritation, flinched back and barked out, his voice echoing across the now quiet park. "Hey, watch where you're going, kid!" The laughter died. Instantly, it was like a switch had been flipped, plunging the entire park into a tense, awkward silence. And this is the moment that everything pivoted. Sam froze, his little airplane slipping from his fingers and falling to the grass. His eyes, wide with fear and confusion, immediately found his father's. He didn't understand what he had done wrong. A different switch flipped inside Leo. That primal, ancient instinct. The one buried deep in the DNA of every parent. The one that says protect your child at all costs. He took a calm step forward, placing himself between his son and the officer. His voice was low, controlled, but with an edge of steel. "Hey, there's no reason to talk to him like that. He's a kid. It was an accident." Miller, the older cop, seemed to sense the shift. He put a hand up. "All right, let's everybody just calm down." But Russo took Leo's words as a challenge. He puffed out his chest. "I'll talk to him however I want. You need to control your kid. And you need to do your job without harassing a child," Leo shot back, his voice rising now. What happened next? It happened in a blur of motion and mistakes. Miller stepped in and put a hand on Leo's chest. "Sir, I said calm down." Leo swatted the hand away. "Don't touch me." Miller, offended, shoved him back. A real shove. Leo stumbled, catching his balance. The crowd gasped. Clara screamed his name. In that split second of chaos, Russo moved to intervene, getting tangled in the scuffle. His hand hit his own hip, and the clip on his holster came undone. The gun fell. It didn't make a loud bang, just a heavy, sickening thud as it hit the grass. It was panic. Pure, unadulterated panic and incompetence. Russo lunged for the weapon on the ground. Maybe his fingers slipped onto the trigger as he grabbed it. Maybe the impact from the fall had damaged the safety. It doesn't matter how. All that matters is that it did. A single deafening, soul-shattering crack tore through the evening air. And then, a silence. A silence so total, so absolute, it felt louder and heavier than the shot itself. Sam didn't cry out. He didn't scream. He just crumpled, like a puppet whose strings had been suddenly and violently cut. The little red airplane lay in the grass beside him. The world doesn't end with a bang. It ends with a single, sharp sound, and the crushing, eternal silence that follows. But even in the ashes of the most devastating tragedy, the seed of life insists that it can grow again. That silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, it wasn't just the end of a moment. It became the foundation for everything that was about to happen. It would shape a grieving father into something else entirely. There are 2 stages of grief. The first is the one you see in movies. The tears, the screaming, the collapsing into someone's arms. It's a storm of emotion, loud and visible. The second stage is the silence, and the silence is far more dangerous. The days that followed Sam's funeral were a blur, a thick gray fog of condolences, casseroles from well-meaning neighbors, and the empty, echoing quiet of a house that was once filled with a child's energy. Then, the official report from the police department was released. The words were sterile, clinical, designed to close a file. A tragic accident. A regrettable procedural error. Officer Russo was suspended with pay, pending a mandatory review. Officer Miller, who had initiated the confrontation, was cleared of all wrongdoing. For the system, the case was closed. But for Leo, the war was just beginning, and he was fighting it alone. Clara cried. She wept in the shower, in the car, in the middle of the night when she thought Leo was asleep. Her grief was a storm, loud and immense. She needed to talk about Sam, to say his name, to keep his memory alive with words and stories. Leo did not. Leo was silent, a cold, heavy, crushing silence. This is the first thing you need to understand about his journey into the dark. His grief was not a storm, it was a glacier. Silent, immense, and moving with unstoppable force, carving a new and terrible landscape inside of him. Clara would reach for his hand in the middle of the night, and it would feel like grasping a stone. She would try to talk to him about their son, and his eyes would look straight through her, as if he was focused on something far, far away. The shared tragedy didn't bring them together. It carved a canyon between them, and they were standing on opposite sides, shouting into a void. One night, long after Clara had cried herself to sleep, Leo got out of bed. He went to the closet in his home office, reached into the back of a deep drawer, and pulled out an old dusty box. Inside, under old papers from a life he had fought so hard to escape, was a ghost, an old cheap burner phone. He charged it, and he scrolled through the contacts until he found a single name: Dante. Dante wasn't a friend, not really. He was a locksmith for doors that were supposed to stay locked forever. A man who knew how the city's shadows worked. Leo sent a single text message, 3 words: "Need to talk." The reply came almost instantly. The usual spot, midnight. The bar was a dive on the industrial side of town. It smelled of stale beer and regret. Dante was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a drink. He didn't offer condolences. He just watched Leo sit down. And this is the second crucial moment, the point of no return. Leo didn't talk about his feelings. He didn't mention the funeral or the silence in his house. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I don't need comfort, Dante. I need information." Dante just nodded slowly, taking a sip of his drink. "Officer Miller, Officer Russo," Leo said. "I want to know where they live, who their families are, what their routines are. I want to know what they love, what they're afraid of losing." Dante looked at him for a long, hard moment. He wasn't looking at the eyes of a grieving father anymore. He was looking at the eyes of a hunter. You see, the tragedy didn't break Leo. It did something far worse. It burned away everything soft, everything gentle, and it revealed what was left underneath. Not flesh and bone, but cold, hard steel. Even in the blackest night, a single burning purpose can feel like a guiding light. But Leo's new purpose wasn't about finding his way back to healing. It was about making sure that the men who had caused his pain would finally understand it, piece by painful piece. This is where the debate truly begins. This is the moment where a grieving father searching for answers starts to look like something else, a vigilante. His first target wasn't Russo, the man whose panicked finger pulled the trigger. No, that would have been too direct, too emotional. Leo's first target was Officer Miller, the older cop, the senior partner, the one who had put his hands on Leo first and allowed a simple noise complaint to spiral into a nightmare. Leo's revenge wouldn't be swift and bloody. It would be slow, precise, a dismantling. Through Dante, he got what he needed. Not a weapon, but a file. A thin file filled with small, forgotten sins that had accumulated over a 20-year career. A falsified overtime report here. A missing piece of evidence from a minor drug bust there. Nothing that would have ever put Miller in jail. But together, it painted a picture of a lazy, careless, and slightly corrupt cop. Leo didn't leak it himself. He was smarter than that. He sent the contents of the file from a ghost email address, created at a public library, to a local journalist. A young reporter known for her ambition and her well-documented dislike of the Oak Haven Police Department. He planted the seed, and he waited. A week later, it sprouted. It wasn't a front-page expose, Just a small but damaging story on page 6 of the city paper. Veteran officer fired amid misconduct allegations. Miller's career, his upcoming pension, his reputation, all of it erased. Not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a keyboard. And here is the first critical point in Leo's transformation, the first real test of his new path. He sat in his quiet house, the newspaper spread out on the kitchen table, and he read the words over and over. He had expected to feel something, a spark of satisfaction, a flicker of triumph, a sense that some small justice had been served. But there was nothing, just a profound, hollow emptiness. He had ruined a man's life, and he felt absolutely nothing at all. He thought to himself, is this it? Is this all there is? The revenge felt administrative, bloodless. It didn't match the screaming void in his chest where his son used to be. Clara saw the article too, and she knew. She wasn't a fool. That night she held the paper up, and her hand was trembling. This was you, wasn't it, Leo? Her voice wasn't accusatory. It was fragile, broken. Leo didn't even look up from the television. He deserved it. Deserved what? She pressed, her voice cracking. To lose his job? His life? This isn't justice, Leo. This is just cruel. Finally, he turned to look at her, and his eyes were cold, so cold. Justice, he said, his voice dangerously calm, is a committee hearing that clears a guilty man. Justice is a paid suspension for the man who killed our son. This is balance. It was the first time the word revenge had been spoken out loud between them, and it hung in the air like poison. The first step on the path of revenge is never the last. It's just a test, a question you ask yourself. How far am I willing to go? And the hollow answer Leo found only pushed him to seek a darker one. Knowing the true difference between seeking justice and seeking revenge is a profound sign of wisdom. But for a heart shattered like Leo's, balance wasn't enough. The scales were still tipped so heavily with his grief. He needed to put more weight on the other side, something heavier than a man's career, something personal. Okay, I need you to take a breath with me here, because this is the hardest part of the story to tell, and it leads to the hardest question of all. Does your own pain ever give you the right to inflict pain on someone who is innocent? Leo's focus now turned to Officer Russo, the man whose hand held the gun, the man whose panic stole his son's future. But Leo decided he wouldn't touch Russo. Not yet. A physical attack, a moment of violence. That would be a mercy. That would be too easy. Instead, he would take from Russo the very thing that had been taken from him, his family, his home, his peace. Through Dante, he hired someone, a digital ghost, a specialist in creating believable, heartbreaking fictions. This person didn't need a weapon. They just needed a keyboard. They went to work, weaving a story out of thin air. Photos of Russo's patrol car, expertly photoshopped to look like it was parked outside a cheap motel in the middle of the day. Text message logs, carefully faked, filled with secret plans and words of affection for a woman who didn't exist. It was a complete, airtight narrative of infidelity. A portrait of a liar and a cheat. It was all printed out, put into a plain, anonymous envelope, and left on the doorstep of Russo's home. A little package of poison, waiting for his wife to find. And Leo didn't just set the fire, he stayed to watch it burn. From his car, parked down the street under the shade of an old oak tree, he saw it all. He saw the door open. He saw the package taken inside. An hour later, he saw the shouting match, muffled and indistinct through the closed windows. He saw the front door fly open, and he saw Russo's wife, her face a mask of tears and rage, throwing a suitcase into the trunk of her car before speeding away, leaving a trail of burning rubber on the asphalt. And then he saw Russo, the man who had seemed so tough, so arrogant in the park. He saw him stumble out of his house and collapse onto the front steps, his head in his hands, his whole body shaking with sobs, a completely broken man. And as Leo watched, he waited for the feeling of satisfaction to come. But it didn't. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something other than rage or emptiness. It was a cold, sickening wave of revulsion, mostly at himself. But the price for this act of calculated cruelty would be paid in his own home. That night, he had left his laptop open on the dining room table. Clara, unable to sleep, had gone to get a glass of water, and she saw it. The open files, the Photoshop drafts of the motel pictures, the Word documents with the fake text messages. She saw the entire ugly plan. She didn't scream this time. She didn't cry. The silence was worse. She just stood there until Leo came out of the bedroom to see what was wrong. She looked at him, her eyes filled not with anger, but with a deep, bottomless horror. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Who have you become, Leo?" He tried to defend himself. "I'm doing what needs to be done. He took our family, so I took his." She shook her head slowly, a single tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. "No," she whispered. "Sam wouldn't want this. Our boy, our sweet, gentle boy, would never want his father to be a monster." That was it. That was the final blow. She left that night. She packed one small bag, just a few clothes. She left her wedding ring on the bedside table, placed carefully on top of a single, folded piece of paper. When Leo finally had the courage to open it, he saw just one sentence, written in her familiar, beautiful handwriting. "I will always love the man I married. I don't know who you are anymore." There's an old saying. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. As Leo stood in his empty house, holding that note, the paper trembling in his hand, he realized he hadn't just crossed a line. He had erased it completely. But even when you are lost in the deepest, darkest woods, there is always a path back to the light, if only you choose to look for it. But Leo wasn't looking for the light anymore. He had lost his son. Now he had lost his wife. He had lost his soul. There was nothing left to lose, and there was nothing left to do, but face the man who started it all, one last time. So what happens when the hunt is over? When you've taken everything from your enemy, his career, his family, his will to live? What is left to take? There was no elaborate plan for this final meeting. No ski masks, no secret entry through a darkened window. Days after Clara left, Leo simply drove to Russo's house in the middle of the afternoon. He walked up the driveway. He noticed the lawn was overgrown. A newspaper was still lying on the porch, faded and damp from the morning dew. He reached for the front doorknob, expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. It turned easily in his hand, the door swinging open with a soft creak into the silent house. It was an invitation, or maybe a surrender. The house was hollow, echoing. There were lighter-colored squares on the walls where picture frames used to hang. Most of the furniture was gone. All that remained was a single armchair in the living room, a television, and a few cardboard boxes. It felt like a tomb, a place where a life used to be. And there he was, Officer Russo, just sitting in the armchair in the dim light, staring at the blank TV screen. He wasn't in uniform. He was just wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked thin, defeated. He didn't even seem surprised to see Leo walk in. He just looked tired. "I knew you'd come eventually," Russo said, his voice raspy, like he hadn't used it in days. Leo didn't say anything. He just walked to the center of the room. The air was thick with unspoken words. Then slowly, he reached into the waistband of his jacket and pulled out a gun. It was heavy and black and looked alien in the quiet domestic space. The tension in the room became a physical thing. This was it, the final act. But Russo didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just let out a long, shaky breath that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. And this is the first moment that shatters every expectation of revenge. "Go on," Russo whispered, his voice cracking. "Do it. I deserve it. God knows I do." He looked up at Leo, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading, but not for his life, for an ending. "But before you do," he continued, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path through the stubble on his cheek, I need you to know. It was an accident. A horrible, stupid, unforgivable accident. I never meant, he choked on the words. "I have a daughter. She's 5. And every single night when I close my eyes, I don't see your son's face. I see hers. And I see what I took from you. I see the father I am. and the father you can't be anymore. And in that moment, hearing those words, something inside Leo finally broke. For months, his rage had been a white-hot fire, a furnace burning everything to ash. But Russo's words, they were like a sudden cold rain, extinguishing the flames and leaving only smoke and sorrow. He looked at the gun in his hand, this heavy, powerful thing that he believed was the source of his justice. Then he looked at the man in the chair. He had spent all this time hunting a monster, but all he saw now was a man, a sad, pathetic, broken man, just like him. And this is the final, pivotal moment of the story, the choice that defines everything. Leo's hand was shaking. All the strength, all the rage seemed to drain out of him, leaving him weak and empty. He thought of Sam. He thought of Clara. He thought of the man he used to be. Slowly, deliberately, his finger relaxed. He lowered the gun to his side. Russo looked at him, confused. What? What are you doing? Leo's voice was a rough, torn whisper. He could barely get the words out. No, he said. Killing you would be easy. An escape. You don't get easy. He took a step back toward the door. You get to live with it, Leo whispered, the words like a curse. You get to wake up every morning and remember. You get to see your daughter's face and know what you did to my son. You get to live in this empty house, in this empty life you made for yourself, forever. That's your sentence. The greatest victory isn't always found in defeating your enemy. Sometimes it's found in the last-second refusal to become exactly like them. True strength isn't about how much pain you can inflict. It's about how much you can endure and still choose compassion. Leo turned and walked out of the hollow house. He didn't look back. He had won. He had gotten his revenge, just not in the way he'd planned. But as he stepped out into the afternoon sun, he wasn't stepping back into his old life. He was stepping into a new kind of emptiness, the quiet, lonely aftermath of a war he had waged mostly against himself. Months passed. The seasons began to change. Imagine Leo now. He's sitting alone on a bench in a different park across town. He watches the world move on without him. He sees a mother pushing her daughter on a swing. He sees a father kneel down to tie his young son's shoe, ruffling his hair before the boy runs off, laughing. A small, familiar ache blossoms in his chest. It's a constant companion now. He reaches into his back pocket and pulls out his wallet. He opens it, and his thumb gently strokes a worn, creased photograph of a 7-year-old boy with a brilliant smile, holding a little red toy airplane. He didn't kill Russo. He walked away. But there was no relief in that choice. There was no peace. He had won every battle. He had defeated every enemy. But standing there in the wreckage of his life, he finally understood. He had lost the entire war the moment it began. And that brings us to the heart of this entire story. The inescapable truth that Leo learned too late. Revenge is a throne built from ashes. You might be able to climb it. You might even be able to sit on it for a moment and feel like a king. But you are the king of nothing, ruling over a desolate kingdom of your own emptiness. It doesn't heal the wound. It just burns away whatever part of your soul was left untouched by the original tragedy. Look, every single one of us has felt wronged. We have all felt that fire of injustice, that burning anger in our chest that screams for someone to pay for our pain. That anger is real, it's human, it's valid. But the story of Leo is a terrifying reminder that we all face a choice. Do we let that fire forge us into something stronger, something more compassionate? Or do we let it consume us until there is nothing left but the smoke and the memory of who we used to be? If this story and these questions have made you think, then please share it with someone. Not to glorify what happened, but to start a conversation about healing, about what justice really means, and about how we can navigate our own pain without losing ourselves completely in the process. And so, I leave you with the question we started with, the one that has been hanging over every single moment of this story. After everything you've seen, from the first perfect afternoon to the final empty victory, was Leo justified? Leave your final answer in the comments below. I will be reading them. And if this journey meant something to you, a simple like is always deeply appreciated. And subscribing to the channel means you and I can continue to explore these difficult but important stories together. Thank you for listening.